He tried to ram my garage door with his luxury electric truck at 6 a.m., so I used his own attempted break-in as proof of harassment. To vacate my wrongful conviction and clear my name after 10 years, the first time I saw the Lake Tahoe cabin through the lens of my own freedom, I understood what people meant when they talked about sacred ground. It wasn't just the way the morning light would cut across the water like a shard of broken glass, hitting the Jeffrey Pines in a way that made the whole world seem clean and new. It was the silence, a deep, resonant quiet broken only by the lapping of water against the granite shore and the distant cry of an osprey. I'd stand on that deck with a cup of black coffee, the scent of pine and cold lake water filling my lungs, and for a few precious minutes, the past was a ghost that couldn't touch me. There was no record, no suspicious glances from PTA moms when I picked up my hypothetical kid from school. No weight of a mistake I didn't even make. There was just me, the woman I loved, and the quiet hum of a life we were building with our own two hands. A life measured in torque wrenches and architectural drafts instead of parole officer visits. It's a story I never thought I'd tell, but if you're watching this, you know how important it is to stand your ground when everything you've built is threatened. If you're new here, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to the Revenge Stories for more tales of justice served and boundaries reclaimed. My name is Jonah Michael Ruiz. I'm a master diesel mechanic, which is just a fancy way of saying I understand broken things and how to fix them. I can listen to the rumble of a 6.7L power stroke engine and diagnose a failing injector by the pitch of its knock. I understand systems, pressure, flow, and the consequence of a single weak point. My hands, permanently stained with grease and etched with the fine white lines of 100 minor burns, are instruments of diagnosis and repair. What I could never understand, until it was almost too late, was the meticulously engineered failure of a human being like Victor Langford III. His toxicity wasn't a leak, it was a design feature. I met Lila in a way that felt like destiny finally deciding to cut me a break. It was a Tuesday pouring rain, the kind that turns the 80 outside Sacramento into a river of spray and hazard lights. I was driving back from rebuilding a transmission for a logging company out in Placerville, my toolbox secured in the bed of my F-150. I saw her first, a sleek, silver BMW 5 Series parked precariously on the narrow shoulder, hazards blinking a frantic red. Then I saw the steam, a geyser of it pluming from the hood, immediately shredded by the wind and rain. As I passed, I caught a glimpse of her through the passenger window. A woman with a sharp, intelligent profile, slamming her palm against the steering wheel in frustration. Architect's blueprints scattered across the leather seat. I didn't think. I just pulled over 100 yards ahead, put on my own hazards, and jogged back through the downpour. She rolled down the window a crack, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and defiance. "You okay?" I'd shouted over the roar of the rain and passing trucks. "My car just died," she yelled back. "It started overheating, then all these lights came on." "Pop the hood," I said. It wasn't a question. She did, and I was drenched in seconds. The problem was immediately obvious, a ruptured coolant hose, a simple $10 part. But the steam was dramatic, and the computer had likely gone into a protective limp mode. I leaned back into the window. "It's a simple fix." A hose blew. "But you can't drive it like this. I can patch it enough to get you to the next exit if you want." Her relief was palpable. "You're a mechanic?" "Something like that," I said.
"I've got my truck."
"I can give you a ride, get the part, and have you back on the road in an hour." She studied my face for a long moment, and I saw the calculation in her eyes. A strange man on a lonely highway in the rain, but I must have passed whatever test she was running, because she nodded. "Okay, thank you." That hour in my truck waiting for the auto parts store to open changed my life. Her name was Lila Langford. She was an architect on her way to a client meeting in Tahoe City. She talked about light and space and how buildings should feel, not just function. I talked about compression ratios and the satisfying click of a bolt torqued to exact specification. We were, on paper, a universe apart. She was the only daughter of Victor Langford III, of the San Francisco Langfords, old money from the shipping and real estate days. I was the son of a janitor from Stockton, a man who worked until his hands were raw to give me a better life, only to die of a heart attack 2 months after I got out of prison. But in that truck, with the rain hammering the roof, we were just two people who understood the beauty of things that worked. The first time I met Victor was a dinner at the Grill in Tahoe City. a place where the waiters wore white jackets and the menus had no prices. Lila had told him I was a technical engineer specializing in heavy machinery, a title that made me wince. Victor was already seated at the best table in the house, overlooking the lake. He wore a watch I later learned was a Patek Philippe, worth more than my truck, my tools, and probably my future earnings combined. He stood up, a tall man who used his height like a weapon, and shook my hand with the enthusiasm of a man petting a strange dog that might have fleas. "Jonah," he said, his voice a smooth baritone that carried an unearned familiarity. "Lila's told me so little about you. I'm eager to fill in the blanks." The entire appetizer course was an interrogation disguised as conversation. "So this technical engineering, is that with a firm? Or are you more of a freelance consultant?" "Mostly independent contracts," I said, which was the truth, if not the whole truth. "I work with heavy machinery for logging, construction. That kind of thing?" "Ah, an entrepreneur," he said, his smile not reaching his cold blue eyes. He then launched into a 20-minute story about negotiating a land deal in Napa. A story designed not to share, but to establish his territory, his dominance, the sheer scale of the world he operated in. The main course was a silent affair, punctuated only by the clink of silverware on bone china. As we left, he clapped me on the shoulder, a gesture that felt more like a claim than a compliment. "Take care of my little girl, Jonah. She's accustomed to a certain standard of living." The pause before standard was a canyon, and I was standing on the wrong side of it. That was Victor's opening gambit. The subtle, persistent reminder that I was an outsider, a temporary visitor in their world. The flashbacks are like a series of bad dreams, each one layering on another brick of frustration, building a wall between the life I had and the peace I wanted. Victor's annual winter gala at his Presidio Heights mansion in San Francisco. The house was a monument to itself, all cold marble and curated art. I wore a new suit I'd bought on sale at Macy's, but I still felt like I was wearing my coveralls, the ghost of grease lingering under my fingernails. Victor made a point of introducing me to his golf buddies, a circle of men with similarly relaxed jawlines and expensive watches. "This is Jonah, Lila's friend." The hesitation before friend was a masterclass in diminishment. "He's in the automotive industry." Then later, as I stood near the grand piano, nursing a drink I didn't want, I overheard him, his voice a low murmur to one of those same buddies. "A phase. She's rebelling. Remember when she wanted to be a sculptor? It's that, with more testosterone." The laughter that followed was a cold, sharp thing that settled in my bones. I spent the rest of the night silently identifying every luxury car in the circular driveway by the sound of its engine, a V12 Ferrari, a rumbling AMG Mercedes, a silent Tesla, a useless skill in that world of quiet judgments. 6 months into our relationship, Victor summoned me to his financial district office, a corner suite with a view of the Bay Bridge that probably cost more per year than I'd make in a decade. He offered me a position as a facilities manager for one of his commercial properties. Steady paycheck, benefits. A quatubiunque. Better than getting your hands dirty, eh? Lila won't have to worry. It was a trap, beautifully laid, a gilded cage designed to make me his employee, to formalize the hierarchy, to put me on a salary he controlled. I declined, thanking him for the offer while my pride screamed in protest. His face tightened, a flicker of genuine annoyance behind the polished mask. Pride is an expensive luxury, son. Don't let it cost you everything. The word son felt like a slap. Son felt like a slap. When I proposed to Lila with her grandmother's simple diamond ring, a ring my mother had left me, the only thing of value she'd ever owned, Lila had cried with joy. Victor's congratulations, delivered over the phone, were a thinly veiled ultimatum. His lawyer, a man named Arthur with the demeanor of a funeral director, drew up a prenuptial agreement that was 50 pages of meticulously worded insults. It stipulated that any assets acquired during the marriage, including my own business earnings, would be considered separate property unless I could prove direct financial contribution from Lila. It questioned the validity of any marital assets accumulated, placing the burden of proof entirely on me. It was a document built on the foundational assumption that I was a gold digger, a predator waiting to get my hands on the Langford fortune. Lila was furious. She drove the 2 hours to the cabin, document in hand, and without a word, threw it into the fire pit we'd built together. She watched the pages curl and blacken, the flames reflecting in her determined eyes. "I don't need a contract to know who you are, Jonah Ruiz," she said, her voice steady. "I know your character. I know your heart. That's the only prenup I need." We got married at the courthouse in South Lake Tahoe with 2 friends as witnesses. Victor did not attend. He sent a silver ice bucket from Tiffany's. The card read, "For the champagne you can now afford." We used it as a planter for succulents. The code to our lake house garage? 0818. Our wedding date. A defiant little secret. A code to our future that he didn't know. Our sanctuary was that cabin. It wasn't the Langford family estate. It was Lila's. A legacy from a grandmother, Eleanor, a formidable woman who had seen through Victor's bluster and had actually liked me. She'd left it to Lila outright, a place Victor's money and influence couldn't touch, or so we thought. We poured ourselves into it. I rebuilt the deck with my own hands, replacing the rotted boards with sustainable IPE wood, sanding each plank until it was smooth as silk. I replumbed the entire house with PEX, crawling through the cramped crawl space for days, emerging covered in dirt and insulation, but triumphant. I restored the old Riverstone fireplace, repointing the mortar until it stood proud and solid once more. Lila redesigned the interior, knocking down walls to make it open and airy, a masterpiece of rustic modernism filled with light and the scent of cedar. It was our shared project, our love made manifest in wood and glass and stone. It was the one place where I was Jonah Ruiz, husband, craftsman, man, not the help, not the phase, not the ex-con, because that was the shadow that followed me, the one Victor loved to let linger in the air, a scent he could release with a well-timed comment. When I was 19, working at a custom auto shop in Modesto, the place burned to the ground. A total loss. The fire marshal ruled it arson. The owner, a man named Gary Hollis, who wore too much cologne and was a friend of Victor's, pointed the finger at me. He told the police he'd caught me siphoning gas a week prior. They found evidence, a red plastic gas can with my fingerprints near the origin point. I'd used that can to fill the lawnmower for the patch of grass out front the day before the fire. My public defender, a kid barely older than me with a stack of cases a mile high, was overworked and unimpressed. "They have fingerprints, a motive, and a witness," he'd said, shrugging. "Take the deal. 2 years, you'll be out in 1. Go to trial, they'll throw the book at you." I was terrified. I took the deal. I lost my voting rights, my gun rights, and any chance at a life that didn't involve explaining my past on every job application in every new neighborhood. It was a stain I could never quite wash out, a label that defined me in the eyes of men like Victor Langford. He never mentioned it directly. He didn't have to. It was in the way he'd casually bring up white-collar crime versus street crime at family dinners, making a show of his nuanced understanding of the justice system. It was in the way he'd ask, with feigned concern, if I needed cash for a retainer for my parole officer, long after my supervision had ended. The injustice of it was a constant low-grade fever, a hum of wrongness beneath the surface of my life. I was kind because Lila loved me, and I loved her too much to let the bitterness win. I was principled because I had to be. One misstep, one raised voice in the wrong situation, and the world would say, "See, we told you so." But the frustration was a corrosion working its way from the inside out, eating away at the man I was trying to be. I was fixing everything around me, engines, decks, plumbing. But I couldn't fix the one broken thing that mattered most, the lie that had set my life on the wrong path before it had even properly begun. The invitation wasn't a request. It was a declaration of war, delivered via a terse text from a number I'd never wanted to save in my phone but had, for Lila's sake, labeled V. Langford, do not answer. Victor. Family meeting. The cabin, tomorrow 9 a.m. Non-negotiable. Lila was in the city, overseeing the final installation of a museum wing she'd designed. She texted back immediately after I forwarded it to her. "He's blowing smoke, Jonah. Ignore him. He's just posturing because I refused to sign the corrective deed. He has no legal standing, but I knew it was more." The air around our peaceful life had felt different for weeks, charged with a silent, gathering storm. Victor had been unusually quiet. No snide comments about the blue-collar aesthetic of our kitchen. No passive-aggressive emails about how our quaint little cabin was affecting the property values of the neighboring mega mansions. It was the quiet of a predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike, the stillness before the trap springs. I was in the garage, the door open to the cool night air, tuning the carburetor on an old Chris Craft boat I was restoring for a client. The boat was a beautiful mahogany-hulled relic, and the work was precise, meditative. The scent of gasoline, marine varnish, and old wood was my sanctuary. The purr of the Rivian's electric motor was so quiet, I almost missed it. A sinister whisper against the backdrop of crickets and rustling pines. It was 6:01 a.m., not 9 years. The sun was just a faint peach-colored smear behind the jagged silhouette of the Sierra Nevada. The truck, a $180,000 statement of eco-conscious wealth, crunched to a halt on the gravel driveway, its headlights cutting twin beams through the lingering dawn mist. The driver's door flew open. Victor Langford III, in a tailored Patagonia vest over a crisp white shirt, didn't walk toward the house. He lifted a black industrial-grade bullhorn to his lips. The gesture was so absurd, so melodramatic, that for a second I thought I was still asleep, trapped in a bad dream. "Jonah, open this door or I'll have you arrested for grand theft. This is your only warning." His voice, distorted and monstrously loud, shattered the morning peace like a brick through stained glass. Birds scattered from the pines in a panic of wings. A deer that had been grazing at the tree line bolted into the woods. My heart hammered against my ribs, a primal animal response to a very modern threat. Grand theft? What the hell was he talking about? My mind raced, inventorying everything in the garage. The boat engine? The tools? It was all mine, legally acquired. I stepped out of the garage, wiping my hands on a red shop rag. "Victor, it's 6 in the morning. Put the bullhorn down. You're going to wake the entire lake." He ignored me, his face a mask of performative outrage, crafted for an audience I couldn't yet see. "This is my family's property. You have no right to be here. You have changed the codes and are holding assets that belong to the Langford Family Trust. This is trespassing at a minimum, and I have reason to believe you've stolen valuable items from the premises. Open this garage immediately." This was the escalation. The boundary violations were no longer subtle digs or legal paperwork. He was on my land at dawn, accusing me of felonies through a bullhorn, turning our quiet street into his personal theater of war. I saw the flicker of blue light from a neighbor's Ring camera next door. Another one across the street activated with a subtle whir. The spectacle was part of his plan. He wasn't just talking to me. He was creating a record, a narrative for the authorities he was sure would come. "I didn't steal anything, Victor. This is Lila's house, our house. You know that. The deed is in her name, free and clear. You need to leave now." "The hell it is," he roared, dropping the bullhorn to a mere shout, his voice cracking with strain. "My mother's estate is still being probated. This asset is part of a complex trust, and as the executor, I am here to secure it against a known felon. Now open this garage. I know you've been using it as your personal chop shop." A chop shop. The old accusation, repurposed and weaponized. The outrage began to boil in my veins, hot and familiar, a feeling I'd spent a lifetime trying to suppress. This was his move. Create a public scene, levy a baseless but damaging accusation, and let the system he knew so well, the same system he'd manipulated once before, do the rest. My record would do the talking for him. The ex-con, the troublemaker, the ungrateful son-in-law who turned to theft. "This is private property," I said, my voice low and steady, a deliberate contrast to his hysterics. I took a step forward, and he instinctively took a step back. "You are trespassing. You are disturbing the peace. Leave now, or I will call the El Dorado County Sheriff and have you removed. El Dorado County Sheriff and have you removed." He laughed, a harsh barking sound that held no humor. "Go ahead, call them. I'll save you the trouble." He pulled out his phone, a latest model iPhone, his thumb hovering over the screen. "I have the non-emergency line on speed dial. Last chance, Ruiz. Open the door." This was the line in the sand, the specific, outrageous demand. He wasn't just asking for entry to check on a trust asset. He was demanding submission. He was demanding I acknowledge his authority over my home, my wife, and my life. He was demanding I prove my obedience by opening the very door that protected the life we'd built. No. The word was simple, flat, and absolute. It hung in the cold air between us. His eyes widened in genuine, unvarnished surprise. I'd never outright defied him before. I had always taken the high road, been the bigger man, turned the other cheek for Lila's sake, for the sake of peace. But this was different. This was our sanctuary, the one place his money and influence couldn't pollute. My no was a wall. Fine. He spat, the word laced with venom. You want to do this the hard way? You think that steel door makes you safe? You're a child playing with tools you don't understand. He jumped back into the Rivian. The silent, powerful electric motor whined with a high-pitched urgency as he threw it into reverse, spraying gravel, then slammed it into drive. He aimed the gleaming, minimalist front grille directly at the new, reinforced steel roll-up door I had installed just a few weeks prior, a project Lila had teased me about for being overly cautious, for seeing threats in the shadows. Jonah, it's a vacation home, not a fortress, she'd said, laughing, as I welded the final crossbrace into place at 3 a.m., driven by a gut feeling I couldn't shake, a mechanic's intuition about impending system failure. Time seemed to slow, the way it does in a crisis. The truck lurched forward, its all-wheel drive gripping the gravel. The sound of the impact wasn't the crash of metal giving way, but a deep resonant gong that echoed across the lake, as the Rivian's carbon fiber bumper and aluminum frame met the solid, 1-inch steel tubing I had secretly welded into place behind the facade of the door. Sparks, bright and orange, flew like a swarm of angry fireflies from the point of impact, cascading over the hood and windshield. The truck's hood crumpled like a beer can. The airbags, curiously, did not deploy. From a house down the street, a golden retriever named Barney, who howled at sirens and vacuum cleaners, started his long, mournful sound, howl, 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 in a steady, sad 3/4 time, a bizarre soundtrack to the scene of automotive suicide. Victor staggered out of the truck, dazed, gripping his forehead where it had smacked the steering wheel. A thin trickle of blood ran down his temple. He was cursing, a stream of vile creative profanity that revealed the man beneath the Patagonia vest. And that's when the shift happened. It was a physical sensation, like a heavy primary gear engaging deep in my soul, transferring the energy from emotion to action. The hot, blinding outrage didn't vanish, but it was instantly cooled, processed, and converted into something else. Pure, cold, strategic focus. The emotion was shut off. The mechanic was online. He had just given me everything I needed. Jonah, his voice was a low rumble, like a well-tuned diesel at idle. You're calling early. Trouble? Victor Langford just tried to ram his way into my garage with a Rivian. There was a beat of silence on the line, and I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. Tell me you got that on video. Multiple angles. My camera, 2 neighbors' Ring cameras. He also accused me of grand theft on a bullhorn for the whole neighborhood to hear. He's claiming the house is part of a trust he controls and that I'm trespassing. Marcus let out a slow, measured whistle. He's escalating. This is a classic power play. He's trying to create a public legal pretext to have you removed before you can establish tenancy, or worse, get you violated on your parole. He's creating a narrative. The unstable ex-con, violent, threatening, stealing from the family. I've been off paper for 5 years. Marcus, guys like him don't check the details, Jonah. They just create the narrative. The ex-con loses his temper, destroys property, threatens his upstanding father-in-law. It's a classic. The cops hear ex-con and the benefit of the doubt evaporates. He's counting on that. That's why I'm calling. I'm done playing defense. I need to go on the offensive. I need to know what he's so afraid of. Why now? Why this level of desperation? Okay, Marcus said, and I heard the familiar click of a mechanical keyboard in the background. He was old school. I'm listening. Start from the very beginning. Every interaction, every comment, every sideways glance. Don't leave anything out, no matter how small it seems. For the next hour, I laid it all out. I was the mechanic diagnosing a complex problem, and I gave him all the data. The dinner at the grill, the condescending entrepreneur label, the job offer that was a gilded cage, the 50-page prenup, the constant, dripping disdain. I told him in detail about the arson conviction, the gas can, the rushed plea deal, the terrified 19-year-old I had been. I gave him the name of the shop owner, Gary Hollis, and mentioned his connection to Victor. I described Victor's recent fixation on the cabin, the corrective deed he wanted Leela to sign. That's the thread, Marcus said, his voice gaining a sharp edge of focus. The arson. If he's willing to use it as a cudgel now, there's a reason. He's afraid of it. People only fear what can hurt them. I'll dig into Hollis. I'll also start a deep dive on Victor's finances. This kind of aggression, this recklessness, it usually means money trouble or a secret he's desperate to protect. Often both. Gathering allies was step 1. Marcus was my intelligence agency. Step 2 was gathering evidence. While Marcus worked the digital world, I worked the physical one. I went into the house, the familiar creak of the hardwood floors a comfort. In the small office Lila and I shared, in the back of a locked filing cabinet behind years of tax returns and business receipts was a single thick manila envelope. Inside was every document related to my case: the initial police report, the court transcripts, the plea agreement, the sentencing memorandum. I hadn't looked at it in a decade. The paper felt toxic in my hands, radioactive with old shame and powerlessness. I sat at our desk, the first rays of the sun now streaming through the window, and started reading. Not as the scared kid I was then, but as the mechanic I was now. I was looking for the weak points, the loose wires, the leaks in the logic. The police report was sparse, lazy. The evidence was laughably circumstantial. My fingerprints on the gas can, which I'd openly used, a single witness, Hollis, claiming I was disgruntled about my pay, a lie, and the motive of covering up theft for which there was no evidence. It was flimsy. It wouldn't have held up at a real trial, which is why the DA had pushed so hard for a plea. They'd threatened me with 10 years if I took it to trial and lost. At 19, terrified, with a public defender who saw me as a case number, I folded. I signed the paper that branded me. Now, with a decade of life experience and a tradesman's understanding of cause and effect, I saw it for what it was: a rushed job, a system eager to close a case with a convenient culprit, a puzzle with pieces forced to fit. Lila called around 8 a.m., her voice tight with worry. "Jonah, what happened? I'm getting texts from people saying my dad was at the house with the police. Are you okay?" I told her everything, keeping my voice calm and factual, like I was reporting on an engine repair. I didn't downplay it, but I didn't let the emotion I'd locked away seep into my words. I heard her breath catch when I described him ramming the garage, the sparks, the bullhorn. "Oh my God, Jonah. Is he insane? I'm coming home. Now I'm leaving the city right now." "Lila, wait." My voice was gentle but firm. "I need you to be safe and I need you to think. I need your brain, not just your anger. Has your father been acting strangely? Any talk about money? The family trust? Any pressure about his will? Anything at all?" She was silent for a long moment, and I could hear her processing, shifting from emotional panic to analytical thought. "Now that you mention it, yes. A few weeks ago, he was asking a lot of questions about Grandma's estate, specifically about the cabin. He was insisting that it was always meant to be part of the main family trust, that Grandma was confused when she deeded it to me directly. He asked if I'd be willing to sign a corrective deed to clear up the title for the probate court. I told him no, of course. He got very quiet, which is never a good sign, and he's been liquidating things. Mom's jewelry, some of the art from the apartment in the city. He said he was curating the collection, but it felt different. The pieces were clicking into place. The cabin was the key. It was a valuable, debt-free asset in a prime location. He needed it, but why so desperately? What financial hole was he in that required this level of aggression? My next move was legal and financial fortification. I called a lawyer, Sarah Chen, whom Marcus had recommended highly. She specialized in defending people against predatory civil actions and overreach by powerful individuals. "Okay, Mr. Ruiz," she said, her voice crisp, efficient, and reassuringly confident. "First, I'm e-filing the restraining order today. That establishes an immediate paper trail and makes his next visit a criminal act. Second, we need to lock down that property. Is the deed solely in your wife's name?" "Yes, Lila Langford Ruiz. It's been recorded at the El Dorado County Recorder's Office for 3 years." "Good. We'll file a homestead declaration immediately. That makes it much harder for any unsecured creditors to place a lien on the property. And given what you're telling me about your father-in-law's financial pressures, that's a real possibility. He might try to get a judgment against you personally and then lien the property. The homestead declaration protects your primary residence up to a certain value. Third, we need to separate your finances. Joint accounts? Yes, one checking, one savings. Open a new individual account at a different bank today. Move half the funds. Not all, or it could be construed as you attempting to hide marital assets. Just enough to ensure you have operating capital if he tries something with your joint accounts, like filing a false report to freeze them. I spent the day executing the plan with methodical precision. The homestead declaration was filed at the county recorder's office by a courier service Sarah arranged. I drove into town and opened a new account at a credit union Lila and I had never used. I transferred exactly half of our savings. The restraining order was processed, and I was given a temporary order with a court date set for 2 weeks away. Each step was a bolt being tightened, a shield being raised, a circuit being completed in the defensive system I was building around our lives. When Lila arrived home that evening, she looked pale but fiercely determined. She dropped her bag and hugged me tightly, her body trembling slightly. "I'm so sorry, Jonah. I never ever thought he'd go this far. I knew he was a snob. I knew he was manipulative. But this is monstrous." "He's not done," I said, holding her close. "We need to be ready." He's backed into a corner. Cornered animals are the most dangerous. 2 days later, Marcus called. His voice was different, electric, charged with the thrill of the hunt. "Jonah, you need to sit down. I found it." "Found what?" My grip tightened on the phone. The reason, the catalyst, the arson. It was him. The world tilted on its axis. The floor beneath my feet felt unsteady. "What?" It was the only word I could manage. Gary Hollis, the shop owner, he was drowning in debt. The business was failing, had been for years. The insurance payout was his only lifeline. But he needed a fall guy, someone believable, with no resources to fight back. Victor Langford was a silent partner in that shop. He loaned Hollis the money to open it, to get his friend a business. When it failed, he stood to lose his entire investment. So they cooked up the plan. Burn it down, collect the insurance. But they needed a patsy. You were the perfect candidate. Young, no family money, no political connections, no resources to mount a defense. You were disposable. My knees felt weak. I leaned heavily against the workbench, the solid wood a grounding force. The world swam in and out of focus. All these years, the shame, the stigma, the lost opportunities, the constant explaining, it was all because of a calculated business decision. I was a line item on a balance sheet. How? How do you know? I was a line item on a balance sheet. How? How do you know? Hollis's ex-wife Cheryl, she was bitter, and she was willing to talk for a price. She remembered the fights, the pressure Victor was putting on Gary. She gave me a name, a guy named Derek Sloan, a fixer Victor used to use for messy situations. Sloan is retired, living in a nice little house in Sedona, Arizona, bought with cash. I called him, played a hunch, told him I was with the IRS, auditing Langford's business dealings from that period. He got nervous, said he didn't want any trouble, that the Modesto job was a long time ago and he was just following orders. He confirmed it. Victor paid him $5,000 in cash to plant the gas can, to make sure your fingerprints were the only ones on it, and to lean on Hollis to point the finger exclusively at you. He even implied that Victor paid off the assistant DA on the case, a guy named Richard Moss, who's now a Superior Court judge, by the way, with a hefty campaign donation to make the case go away quickly. It was all a transaction, Jonah. Your life, your future, for their profit. The outrage I had felt before was a candle compared to the supernova that now exploded in my chest. It wasn't just disdain, it wasn't just classism. It was a premeditated, calculated, cold-blooded destruction of my life. He had stolen my youth, my reputation, my future, all to save a $50,000 investment and maybe double his money with the insurance fraud. He had looked me in the eye at Christmas parties, shaken my hand, all while knowing he was the architect of my ruin. "There's more," Marcus said, and I could hear the rustle of papers. Victor's finances are a house of cards. He's leveraged to the hilt. Bad investments in crypto, a failed tech startup, and he's been embezzling from the family trust to cover his margins. His mistress, a woman named Bianca Volkov, half his age, is pressuring him for a commitment, a ring, a house. He drafted a new codicil to his will just last month, cutting Lila out entirely and leaving everything to Bianca. He knows Lila would never stand for it, would contest it, and likely win. So he needs to discredit her too, or get control of her assets, like this cabin, to sell them off quickly and quietly to cover his debts and keep Bianca happy. The full, horrifying picture came into devastating focus. He wasn't just trying to push me out. He was trying to erase us, to liquidate our lives and our future, to save his own crumbling empire and fund his midlife crisis. The betrayal was so profound it was almost abstract, a thing of pure, distilled evil. "And one last thing," Marcus said, his voice dropping, becoming almost gentle. Layla, is she? I was digging through his phone records, cross-referencing his calls to Bianca. There's a call to a private lab in San Francisco, followed by a call from Bianca that lasted 20 minutes. The lab does early confidential pregnancy testing. The air left my lungs in a sudden, painful rush. Lila. She'd been acting strangely tired lately, a little nauseous in the mornings. Secretive. I'd found a hidden, used pregnancy test in the trash can under the sink a week ago, but the result window was smudged, unreadable. I hadn't wanted to push her, to get my hopes up, to add any pressure. I thought she'd tell me when she was ready. Jonah, Marcus said, his voice firm now. You need to find out. If Lila is pregnant, that changes everything. It makes you a family in the eyes of the law and the world. It makes his actions not just an attack on you and Lila, but on his own grandchild. The stakes just got infinitely higher. It's no longer about the past. It's about the future. I hung up the phone, my hand trembling. The strategic awakening was complete. I knew my enemy. I knew his motives, his crimes, his weaknesses. I had the evidence. Marcus had gotten me a digital copy of the original unredacted police report, which showed notes about Hollis's financial troubles and his connection to Victor that were never pursued. He had the bank records showing the series of payments from Victor to Sloan in the weeks leading up to the fire. He had a sworn, notarized affidavit from Cheryl Hollis. And he had the voicemail. The crown jewel, the smoking gun. Somehow, Marcus had managed to social engineer his way into getting a clean, digital audio file from Sloan's old voicemail system, a backup the fixer had kept for insurance against his volatile employer. It was Victor's voice, crisp and clear, devoid of its usual polished baritone, sharp with impatience and command. It's me. The Modesto situation. Burn the shed, blame the Mexican kid. Insurance pays double. Make it clean, Derek. I don't want any blowback. Call me when it's done. Hearing it was like being punched in the soul. The casual racist dismissal? The Mexican kid. I was nobody to him. A demographic, a stereotype, a disposable asset, the cold-blooded instruction. Insurance pays double. My life had a price, and it was the difference between the insured value and the actual value of a failing business. I looked at the tools on my wall, the wrenches hanging in order of size, the sockets in their pristine foam cutouts, the diagnostic computer with its tangled cords. I knew how to fix machines, how to bring order to chaos, how to make broken things whole. Now I had to learn how to dismantle a man. The satisfaction of having the puzzle solved, of holding the undeniable truth in my hands, was a powerful, potent fuel. It was a clean, pure energy that burned away the last of my fear and doubt. The law had failed me once. It wouldn't fail me again. This time I wouldn't be taking a plea. This time I was going to trial, and the courtroom would be my own front yard. The evidence was my testimony, and the jury was the whole world. The confrontation was not set in a sterile courtroom with its hushed tones and procedural formality. It was set on the stage Victor himself had chosen, the stage he had violently attempted to claim as his own. Our driveway, at dawn. I knew he would be back. The temporary restraining order was a piece of paper. To a man like Victor, it was a provocation, an unfair advantage I had gained through the system, one he needed to neutralize with his own brand of overwhelming force. He would see it not as a legal boundary, but as a challenge to his authority. I was ready. I had spent the night preparing, not with the anxious energy of a man awaiting a battle, but with the focused, serene intensity of a mechanic prepping for a complex engine swap on a tight deadline. Every tool was laid out. Every step was planned, from the initial engagement to the final, decisive click of the torque wrench. I had downloaded the audio file to my phone and synced it to the powerful portable Bluetooth speaker I used for music in the garage. I had printed copies of the key documents, the bank records, the affidavit, the unredacted police report, and placed them in a neat folder on the porch table, just in case. Lila knew. I had told her everything the night before, after a quiet dinner. I sat her down on the sofa, the fire crackling in the fireplace I had rebuilt, and I laid it out for her, piece by piece. I showed her the documents. I played her the voicemail. She listened, her face a shifting landscape of horror, disbelief, and a dawning volcanic rage. She didn't cry at first. She was too stunned for tears. She just stared at the speaker as her father's voice, cold and transactional, laid out the plot to destroy the man she loved. "When?" was all she could whisper when it ended. "Over a decade ago," I said softly. He framed me to collect insurance money on a business he was a silent partner in. She stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the dark lake for a long, long time. When she turned around, her cheeks were wet, but her eyes were dry and held a fire I had never seen before. "He's dead to me," she said, her voice flat and final. "That man is not my father. My father would never have done that. He's a stranger, and he's a monster." Then she came to me, took my hands, and placed them on her still flat stomach. "I'm 7 weeks pregnant, Jonah. I had the confirmation from the lab last week. I was waiting for the first ultrasound, to see the heartbeat, to be absolutely sure before I told you. I was going to surprise you this weekend." The news landed not as a shock, but as the final missing component, the last bolt that needed to be tightened before the engine could be turned over. This was no longer just about the past. It was about the future, our family. The life growing inside her was a tangible representation of everything Victor had tried to steal from us. Not just property, but legacy, continuity, love. "I'm playing the voicemail. Lila," I told her, my voice firm. "When he comes, I'm making it public. I'm ending this." She nodded, her jaw set in a line of granite. "Play it." So, at 6:05 a.m., right on schedule, the black Lincoln Town car pulled up. No Rivian this time. Victor stepped out, looking older, more haggard, and infinitely more dangerous than he had just days before. The Polish was gone, replaced by a raw, desperate energy. He was accompanied by a man in a cheap, ill-fitting suit, a process server. The man held a thick, legal-sized envelope. The paper offensive had begun. He didn't have a bullhorn this time. His voice was raw, stripped of its practiced cadence. "Ruiz, I'm here to serve you with papers. A civil suit for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and coercion, and an emergency motion to have you evicted from this property pending the outcome of the trust litigation. You have 5 seconds to accept service." You have 5 seconds to accept service. I stood on the porch, silent and still. I was holding the small black Bluetooth speaker. Lila stood beside me, wrapped not in a designer coat, but in my old, oil-stained Carhartt jacket, her hands tucked into the pockets, a symbolic armor that meant more than any lawyer's letter. Victor strode forward, his entitlement a force field that made him ignore the restraining order. The sheriff's warning, the basic laws of trespass. The process server followed, looking deeply uncomfortable, his eyes darting toward the visible cameras. "Cat got your tongue?" Victor sneered, stopping at the bottom of the porch steps, his eyes blazing with a mixture of hatred and triumph. "Finally realized you're out of your depth? You can't fight this with your wrenches and your righteous anger, Jonah. You'll lose. You always lose? Sign over your interest in the property, walk away from my daughter, and I'll make the new criminal charges go away. This is your last chance." I finally spoke, my voice calm and clear, carrying in the cold, still morning air like the ring of a hammer on anvil. "What criminal charges, Victor? The new ones you're fabricating, or the old ones from the arson you arranged?" His face went slack with shock, then tightened into a mask of pure, incandescent fury. "You lying little piece of shit! How dare you!" I pressed play on my phone. The speaker crackled to life, and then his own voice from a decade past filled the space between us, echoing slightly in the dawn quiet. It was unmistakably him, but a cruder, more brutal version, the real man stripped of his social veneer. "It's me. The Modesto situation. Burn the shed, blame the Mexican kid, insurance pays double. Make it clean, Derek. I don't want any blowback. Call me when it's done." It was the evidence cascade, and it was utterly, completely devastating. Victor's face drained of all color, becoming a ghastly white mask. He looked like a man who had just stepped into an open elevator shaft, the ground vanishing from beneath his feet. The process server took a sharp step back, his eyes wide with shock, the legal papers forgotten in his hand. "That's a forgery," Victor sputtered, but the terror in his eyes, the way his body seemed to shrink, betrayed him. His voice was a reedy whisper. "A deepfake. You can't prove that's me. It's a voice actor. This is slander." "I have the original digital file, Victor," I said, my voice still even, the mechanic explaining the diagnosis. "Forensically verified by an expert. I have the sworn affidavit from Gary Hollis's ex-wife, Cheryl, detailing your partnership and the plan to burn down the shop for the insurance money. I have the bank records showing your payments to Derek Sloan, the fixer you hired to plant the evidence. And I have the unredacted police report that your paid-off assistant DA, Richard Moss, who's now a judge, remember? Buried. The report that noted Hollis's debts and your connection to the business." I took a single step forward, and he flinched as if I'd struck him. "You didn't just frame me, Victor. You bought a conviction. You stole a year of my life. You put a stain on my name that I've carried every single day since. You looked me in the eye and called me son, while knowing you were the reason I had felon branded on my record. And for what? To save a $50,000 investment? To double your money?" The collapse began. It was not loud or dramatic. It was a quiet, internal crumbling, the sound of a soul disintegrating under the weight of its own corruption. His shoulders slumped, the expensive fabric of his jacket suddenly looking like a shroud. The carefully constructed facade of the powerful patriarch, the man who controlled boardrooms and family dinners, cracked and fell away, revealing a small, desperate, and utterly cornered man. The performance was over. There was no audience left to fool. "You don't understand," he whispered, his voice breaking, his eyes pleading now. "The debts, they were crushing me. Bianca, she was going to leave. I was trapped. I had no choice. And so you decided to trap me?" I said, the first hint of heat, of the raw, scalding injustice entering my voice. "You decided my life, my future was a fair price for your comfort, for your mistress. You decided I was disposable? The Mexican kid you could throw into the fire to save yourself?" It was then that Lila stepped forward. She moved to the edge of the porch, looking down at him, her face pale but composed, her eyes blazing with a cold, absolute fire. She was no longer his daughter. She was a force of nature, a protector of her family. "Dad," she said, and the word was an indictment, a final, terrible judgment. "Lila, honey," he said, reaching a trembling, pleading hand toward her, his last desperate gamble. "This is all a terrible misunderstanding. He's twisting things. He's dangerous. He's trying to turn you against me." "The code is 0818, she interrupted, her voice cutting through his lies like a scalpel, clean and precise and final. "Our wedding date. The wedding you didn't bother to attend because you were too proud to acknowledge the man I love. You're not on the guest list anymore. You are not welcome here. You are not a part of this family. Not my family." She placed a hand on her stomach, a gesture of pure defiant protection. "Not my child's family." The final annihilating blow. "Child?" he breathed, his eyes darting to her stomach, the realization dawning that he had not just betrayed his daughter and her husband, but his own unborn grandchild. The circle of his destruction was now complete. "That's right," I said, my arm going around Lila's shoulders. "Your grandchild, the one you were willing to make homeless, to strip of their inheritance, just to pay off your debts and your mistress." The consequences arrived not with the blare of a siren, but with the quiet, authoritative purr of two more sedans that pulled up behind the town car. They were unmarked, but everyone knew what they were. A Ford Taurus and a Chevrolet Impala, government issue, the California Department of Insurance Fraud Division, and the FBI. Marcus had made his calls, presenting the evidence of multi-county insurance fraud, coupled with the allegation of bribing a public official, which made it a federal matter. The evidence was overwhelming, and the voicemail was a prosecutor's dream. Agents stepped out, two from each car, dressed in dark suits. They were calm, professional, and moved with purpose. One, a tall woman with a severe bun and sharp eyes, approached Victor. "Victor Langford III?" He could only nod, his mouth working but no sound coming out. "We have a federal warrant for your arrest for conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, wire fraud, and bribery of a public official. You have the right to remain silent." As they read him his Miranda rights, the full, catastrophic weight of his actions came crashing down on him. This wasn't a civil matter anymore, a squabble over a property deed. This was felony territory, federal prison. The social repercussions would be immediate and absolute. The Ring camera footage from this morning, combined with the audio of the damning voicemail, would be on the local news by noon and the national financial blogs by afternoon. His country club, his business associates, his whole meticulously constructed world, it would all evaporate in the heat of this scandal. He was becoming a ghost in his own life. They handcuffed him. The metal clicks were the final percussive notes of his reckoning, the period at the end of the sentence of his life. He didn't look at us as they led him to the car. He just stared straight ahead. A broken king watching his kingdom dissolve into dust and disgrace. His legacy nothing but a court docket number and a prison ID. The process server had long since slipped away, the legal papers left discarded on the gravel like the meaningless trash they were. The aftermath was quiet, a deep, profound silence that felt like a balm. The sun was fully over the mountains now, bathing the lake, the trees, The porch where we stood, in its brilliant, cleansing light, the golden retriever down the street had stopped howling. The only sound was the gentle, rhythmic lapping of water against the shore, the world returning to its natural order. The legal and financial repercussions unfolded over the following months like a slow-motion avalanche. The original arson conviction was vacated. My record was expunged. I received a formal letter of apology from the state of California, which I framed and hung in the garage next to my certification from the National Institute for Automotive Service Excellence. Victor, facing overwhelming, irrefutable evidence, took a plea deal to avoid a public trial that would have eviscerated what was left of his reputation. He was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison with no chance of parole. His assets were liquidated to pay restitution to the insurance company and to me, and to cover the massive fines. The world of Victor Langford III was systematically dismantled, piece by piece, asset by asset, connection by connection, until nothing was left but the memory of his hubris and the cold reality of a prison cell. But in that moment, standing on the porch with my wife's hand in mine and our child growing safe inside her, there was only catharsis, a deep, soul-deep cleansing. The poison that had been festering in my life for over a decade had been drawn from the wound. The lie that had defined me, that had shaped every interaction, every job application, every moment of self-doubt, was gone, erased by the undeniable, publicly aired truth. The mechanic had fixed the one broken thing that mattered most. I had reclaimed my name. Jonah Ruiz was no longer an ex-con. He was a husband, a father-to-be, a business owner, a man who had faced the machine that crushed him and, piece by piece, taken it apart until it was nothing but harmless scrap. Dawn at the lake house feels different now. It's not just the light cutting across the water or the clean scent of pine or the profound quiet. It's a feeling that seeps into the very wood of the deck, into the stones of the fireplace, into the marrow of my bones. The light doesn't just feel clean, it feels earned. The peace is deeper, rooted not in ignorance, but in the hard-won knowledge that we fought for this tranquility and won. The shadow of the past is gone, not just faded, but banished by the bright, legal fire of the truth. It has been replaced by the bright, demanding, beautiful hope of the future. The morning after Victor's arrest, I walked into the garage. The sharp metallic scent of the shop was a welcome familiarity. The dent in the new steel roll-up door was still there, a permanent scar and a trophy, a reminder of the day the war turned. I looked at the blank space above the door, the space where the previous owner had once had a faded, the Langford Retreat sign. An idea, solid and perfect, clicked into place in my mind. A complete vision as clear as a technical schematic. I spent the day in the shop, cutting and welding, losing myself in the pure, physical joy of creation. I used scrap metal from the Chris Craft boat I was restoring. Sturdy, marine-grade aluminum that would withstand the mountain weather. I shaped the letters with a plasma cutter, the blue flame slicing through the metal with a satisfying hiss, then carefully welded each one to a solid, brushed steel backing plate. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in breathtaking shades of orange, purple, and deep blue, I mounted the new sign above the garage door. It was heavy, substantial. It meant something. It read, Ruiz Langford Mechanics, family-owned, felons welcome. It was more than a sign. It was a declaration, a reclamation of my past and a promise for the future. It wasn't just a business name, it was a mission statement. We would hire people like me, people who had paid their debt to society but still carried the invisible stain, who faced the closed doors and the skeptical looks. We would give them a second chance that I never officially got, but had to claw back for myself with blood, sweat, and truth. We would be a place where your past didn't define your future, where your skills and your character were the only currencies that mattered. Lila came out to see it as the last bolts were tightened. She didn't say anything for a long time, just stood there with her arms crossed, her head tilted, taking it in. Then she slipped her hand into mine and squeezed, her grip strong and sure. Her eyes were shiny with unshed tears, but she was smiling, a real deep, peaceful smile that reached all the way to her soul. That sign, in its bold, unapologetic statement, represented everything we had overcome, and everything we were building together out of the ashes. The aftermath of the battle was a time of profound healing and explosive growth. With the immense, suffocating weight of the false conviction finally lifted, I felt like I could finally stand to my full height, breathe without a constricting band around my chest. I started the process of getting my full rights restored, not that I cared much about owning a gun, but because I could. Because it was my right and it had been taken from me. The day I received my voter registration card in the mail, I framed it too. It hung next to the letter of apology. The business, Ruiz Langford Mechanics, took off faster than I could have ever imagined. The story, as these things do, had gotten around the tight-knit Tahoe community. The sign became a local landmark, a talking point. People came from all over the lake, from Incline Village to South Lake Tahoe, to have us work on their boats, their cars, their snowmobiles, their ATVs. They came initially for the story, for the principle, but they stayed for the quality of the work. We were honest, fast, and damn good. I hired 2 guys with records within the first month. One, Leo, had done time for theft, a crime of desperation during a meth addiction he'd long since conquered. The other, David, had a drug possession charge from his reckless youth. They were the hardest, most loyal, most meticulous workers I'd ever met. They understood the value of a second chance, and they would have walked through fire for the shop that gave it to them. We became a little family, a band of brothers who had all been broken and were helping each other stay whole. Lila's architecture firm, after a period of awkwardness, fully embraced her. The scandal with her father could have tainted her, but her talent, her integrity, and her fierce professionalism were beyond question. If anything, it gave her a new layer of depth and resilience that clients found compelling. She started pivoting her practice, using her skills to build people up, not just to create monuments to wealth. She won a contract to design a new community center in an underserved neighborhood of Sacramento, a project that poured light and hope into a place that needed it. Her work was featured in magazines, not for its opulence, but for its humanity. And then, there was the tiny home. One evening, after a long day at the shop, I came home to find new blueprints taped to the refrigerator. Not the sleek, professional rolls she brought home from work, but sketches on tracing paper, filled with her precise, artistic handwriting and little notes in the margins. They were the designs for a small, perfect, hyper-efficient dwelling, no more than 400 square feet. "It's for the back of the lot," she said, coming up behind me and wrapping her arms around my waist, her voice full of excitement. Overlooking the cove, where the aspens are, I thought we could build it ourselves. A project for us. No clients, no deadlines. A guest house for when my mom visits, or maybe an office. A quiet place to get away while still being home. She rested her chin on my shoulder. "I want to use reclaimed barnwood for the siding, and a living roof with sedums. It'll be off-grid capable with solar panels and a composting toilet." The design was stunning. It was all clean lines and large strategic windows, designed to capture the light and the view of the lake from every angle. It was efficient, beautiful, and built to last generations. Taped right in the center of the main living area sketch was a small, grainy black and white photo I hadn't noticed before. The first ultrasound. Our baby, a tiny bean-shaped blur with a flickering, strong heartbeat. That image, the blueprint of our child placed squarely in the blueprint of our future, was the most powerful symbol of our new beginning I could possibly imagine. We were builders. We were creators. We were taking the scars of our past, the lessons learned in the fire, and using them as the foundation for something strong and beautiful and entirely our own. We were building a family, a business, a home, and a legacy of redemption. The thematic conclusion of this whole long story isn't really about revenge. That's too small a word for what happened. It's about restoration. It's about the fundamental truth that some things are worth fighting for. Your name, your home, your family, your truth. It's about understanding that taking the high road doesn't mean being a doormat. It means fighting with the tools of truth and integrity, not the weapons of lies and coercion. It means drawing a line in the sand of your own soul and being willing to defend it, not with blind rage, but with relentless, principled strategy. With the cold, clean focus of a craftsman, Victor tried to break me with the very system he had perverted for his own gain. I broke him by using that same system, correctly this time. I used the law, I used evidence, I used the power of public record, and I used the unwavering support of the people who loved me. I learned that the most powerful revenge is not inflicting pain, but achieving a peace so profound that your enemy's memory becomes irrelevant. It is a life lived well, a life built joyfully and defiantly on the very rubble your enemies tried to bury you under. If this story of reclaiming your name and defending your family's future resonates with you, if you believe that everyone, no matter their past, deserves a chance to build something beautiful from the ashes. Then share this story. Let others know that standing your ground is not just an act of defiance, but an act of creation. The first and most important step in building the life you deserve. And make sure you're subscribed to the Revenge Stories, because everyone deserves to see justice served, and remember that no one can take your future unless you let them. The dawn is here. The code to our garage is still 08118. Our wedding date. A reminder that from this day forward, we decide who gets in. And we've built a life so strong, so full of light and love and the sound of a future being hammered into existence, that no one will ever darken our door again. That no one will ever darken our door again.